thanks everyone. Thanks for coming. Quite happy to be here. Welcome to this session on what's the latest on C4HANA. And just a bit of background. C4HANA obviously is the SAP Customer Experience Suite. It was initially announced middle of 2018 at the at the Sapphire, and caused quite a bit of uproar. And back then there was a lot of confusion, so I ran a few sessions with customers and explained a little bit what is C4HANA, what are the components, what is actually behind it. And that was quite successful. So end of last year we had another session where we looked at, okay, how far has C4HANA come? What is it now? Are some of the promises and visions actually fulfilled? And I basically updated the deck a bit and can share that with you today. I'm quite happy about that. Now, just a little bit about myself. So, my name is Matthias. I'm the CTO of Fair Consulting Group, which is a consulting firm here in Australia, and we specialize especially on SAP customer experience solutions, things like Hybris and Cloud for Customer and so on. Myself, I've been doing a lot of different things in the past. So, I've been doing development and solution architecture and functional leadership roles and various other things. These days I predominantly advise customers on solution architecture. Now, this is not an SAP product marketing presentation, so I'm not trying to sell you C4HANA or anything like that. I might even be a bit critical in parts, but I'm quite passionate about it. So I don't know if we've got anyone from SAP here, so try not to be too critical, I guess. Oh, we do, okay. But yeah, that's just to provide my own point of view on a few things. Now, basically, when you look at how C4HANA used to be marketed and how it is presented, a good example of this is middle of last year. There was a blog on the SAP community, so I found the blog, of course, via the community, and it was a very well-written, compelling blog, and it kind of ended with that message: join the SAP C4HANA movement. It's almost like a revolution. So go on the barricades and get the C4HANA. And basically, the blog gave a few arguments why you should do this, and in particular, it made the point that you should actually get away from on-premise. If you're currently running SAP CRM, like a few customers here in Melbourne still, you should actually throw that away and go to the cloud. And the reason for that is, well, 70% of all CRM software runs in the cloud, so they must be doing something right. And let's just go with that as well, and go to the cloud. Obviously, don't want to be left behind. And with that, there's a lot of cool things that come. There's a beautiful user experience. We can be more agile. We have embedded intelligence. We can innovate very quickly, and it does in fact run on mobile devices as well. So yeah, fantastic, right? Sounds really good. So where do I sign up for this, given that I'm already sold? Just maybe one more thing. How do I buy C4HANA actually? Like, can I just ask SAP, give me C4HANA, and then I install it? Do I need to get the whole thing, or do I maybe get like parts of it as well? What is this whole suite thing? Do I need that? And actually, if I don't use my SAP CRM anymore, or the plugin in S4HANA, do I need to now re-implement everything from scratch? Like everything that I've done before in SAP CRM is kind of all in vain. And because it's called C4HANA, obviously it looks like I need a HANA database. And then in the blog it also says it runs on SAP Cloud Platform, so I probably need SAP Cloud Platform as well, right? So and in general, I mean, if it's a software as a service, like a SaaS solution, why do I actually care about the database? Shouldn't that be like all sort of abstracted away, right? So lots of questions, and these are in fact questions that I get from customers all the time, right? It's sort of getting a little bit better now, but especially when this suite was announced, that was what everyone was asking. And the main concept, or the main question that you often get is this just another monolithic block from SAP, another wooden, inflexible thing, right? That I can't really customize or extend. And if you read through the blog, I mean, it basically says, well, if you implemented SAP CRM before, you know the concept of a business suite. So this is basically the same thing. It's another business suite. Previously, you implemented sales, service, commerce, marketing. So now you can do that again. And And basically, it is on the cloud, so it's inherently great, right? So effectively, the way SAP C4HANA was marketed in the past, or the way it often appeared to customers, was that I need this block of SCP, SAP Cloud Platform, and then I get the other block, C4HANA, on top. And that's effectively how it works, right? And that's, of course, pretty much completely wrong, right? Because, first of all, you don't need SAP Cloud Platform. I mean, none of the C4HANA solutions runs on SAP Cloud Platform. They might leverage some services from it, and they might be able to leverage its capabilities, but it doesn't actually run on SAP Cloud Platform. And most of the solutions don't even use HANA as a database, right? They use all sorts of databases, and that's also part of the legacy of when SAP bought the different solutions, right? What I think maybe the way C4HANA should be marketed, and I can see that actually with the last TechEd presentations by the chief architect and by some of the vice presidents of product marketing, is that C4HANA is a bit more like Lego. Yeah, so if we want to stay with the analogy of toys, for a better word, it's not a wooden block, it's more like Lego. And how so? Like, what do I mean with that? Well, to illustrate this, I give you a little story. So back in my home, in my study, I've got this Lego Starship Star Wars cruiser on my shelf. I painstakingly assembled that. Once you have children, you kind of rediscover your love for these things. And it was, it's really quite nice, sits there and so on. But then my son was coming in and said, okay, Papa, this spaceship is really boring. Can we just disassemble it and reassemble it and make something new out of it? And I was like, maybe not. It's nice the way it is, just leave it like that, right? And keep it on the shelf. But when I thought about this, I mean, when I prepared this presentation back then, what it actually means is that different audiences demand different experiences, right? So the experience that my 4-year-old son wants is very different from the one that like a middle-aged architect wants from Lego, right? So as a result, it is actually not really realistic or really appropriate to think that you can just buy a customer experience suite, plug it into your environment, and happy days, you're basically done, right? That's not really how it can work. And because you always need to customize, you need to extend, you need to change a few things, right? And as a result, what I think the way C4HANA should work, and it actually does work, is it should be modular, right? So just like Lego, you don't need all the bricks necessarily, right? You just take a few and you leave a few in the box and you use them later, right? And you build something else with it in the future. It should be complementary, which means if I have the different blocks and they might be quite similar, like this four element here, but they have different colors, so they might actually do different things, right? They're similar, but they also have very specific features. And it should be extensible. And obviously Lego is the quintessential historical extensible toy, right? It's got this standard interface, like an interlocking brick mechanism. So that's actually a good example of how something can work. And also it should be reusable. So you want to have a platform that you can reuse and you can build on top of it, right? The other thing is C4HANA as a suite of different solutions is actually meant for the front office. So we had this discussion just now around the web and the customer experience channel versus the back of house, which is your ERP system. And the way it should actually be, and the way SAP is now marketing it, is that C4HANA is your set of front office applications that optimize different aspects of your front-end customer experience, but that doesn't mean you need to throw away your back-end solutions like the SAP CRM and the SAP ERP, right? And if you look at the roadmap for the customer experience suite, you can actually find a different picture to this, but that kind of says the same thing, that you can actually complement your existing back-office applications with the C4HANA suite. And obviously, if you're already on S4HANA, you're planning to go to S4HANA, you might know that SAP has done a pretty interesting trick. They just taken SAP CRM, sort of removed a few bits and then remodeled it, and then put it into S4HANA as the S4HANA for Customer Management plugin. And effectively, it's the same thing, right? It's just S4HANA and CRM bundled. The code is still very similar, and then you can still put the C4HANA in front. Yeah. So what I try to do is like have a slightly better definition of what C4HANA is, which kind of picks up the points that I was just trying to make. And well, it's a slightly ambiguous name, like doesn't really say much, but the most important part is it's modular. It's several modular cloud applications from SAP, and they allow you to optimize different aspects of your front office experience, right? And overall, the purpose of this is to improve the customer experience, right? Cool. Now, having said that, if you look at how the suite has come along in the last 1.5 years, what I did back then when it was announced is I actually looked at the promise that was made at that original Sapphire press conference. And Alex Atzberger, the former president of Customer Experience, was basically making the statement around efficiency and driving effectiveness. I didn't fully get this, or didn't fully understand the statement, but what was more interesting was actually what he said afterwards. There was 4 key elements of C4HANA that SAP was trying to achieve. One was it should have one data model. Yeah? So all the different clouds should be based on one data model, which is basically your customer. There should be one extension framework, so there should be one way to extend the C4HANA applications, no matter which cloud it is, and it should be based on SAP Cloud Platform. It should have better intelligence, so not just intelligence, it should be better. He didn't really say better than what, but I presume better than the competition, so more intelligent. But yeah, it should definitely be quite intelligent through Leonardo, and it should have a beautiful user experience, consistent across all the different suites with the Fiori design principles and so on. Now, since that original announcement, 1.5 years, what has actually changed? And that's the core of my presentation. How has SAP actually tried to achieve these visions, these different promises? And what I'll be looking at is just the first 2, so the data model and the extension framework, because the other things probably warrant a separate discussion. And I'll start with the data model. And if you look at how it was originally presented at the Sapphire, it looked a bit like this. A bit of a architecture diagram, right? Just a few boxes. But you can see that the data was sort of at the bottom in this SAP Customer Data Cloud. Yeah, so effectively you have the different clouds on top, Marketing Cloud and Service Cloud and Sales Cloud and Commerce Cloud, but then Customer Data Cloud sits underneath. So the question that I've been asked by customers a lot last year was, does that mean that all my customer data now sits in CDC, Customer Data Cloud? Do I need to put everything in there? What if I already have data in my Marketing Cloud or in my Service Cloud? Do I need to put everything into CDC? Does it become my new master data source, right? And that is not really how it works, right? Because that would probably be quite bold, and anyways, CDC is the former Geekia, so might be a bit overwhelmed by all that SAP data. How it actually works is that each of these solutions contributes a little bit to the overall customer profile, right? So each part has a little bit of the customer data, and together it forms your overall customer profile. And to illustrate this point, I've created this Venn diagram. I love Venn diagrams. As a consultant, they really show how things hang together. And what you see here in the Venn diagram is like 3 different areas, which represent the different solutions within C4HANA. The top left is Commerce Cloud CDS. So CDS is Context-Driven Services, is a part of Commerce Cloud. Don't need to go into too much detail, but just assume it's like a part of Commerce Cloud. Top right is Marketing Cloud, and at the bottom is Customer Data Cloud. So these are the different elements or the different clouds in C4HANA. And all of them store some part of the customer profile, right? So Customer Data Cloud, for instance, has a built-in component. If you go to sap.com, you can see customer profile as part of it. The Commerce Cloud CDS used to be called Hybris Profile, in fact, so it even has that in the name, right? Hybris Profile. They later renamed it. And Marketing Cloud obviously has this premise of, or the promise of a golden record. I combine all my different data into one and then create a unique profile. So all of these solutions actually have parts of that customer profile. And then there are some overlaps, right? So the different solutions can do similar things. So for instance, in Commerce Cloud CDS, it's kind of like a real-time analytical engine. I can do things like product recommendations. I have a bit of lightweight segmentation, and I also have some cart abandonment feature. So if the customer browses the website, the commerce website, and then they leave something in their cart and they run away, then we can find that and effectively send them an email and say, okay, hey, you left something in your cart, don't you want to check out now, right? But interestingly enough, all these features are also in Marketing Cloud, right? So that's why it's in the middle there. And effectively, you can achieve the same thing there as well. And similarly, Marketing Cloud has a feature to capture consent. So you can capture whether a customer is happy to be contacted by email or SMS or phone, right? Which is very important in the days of GDPR, like data privacy regulations. So you want to make sure that you actually have the consent of the customer to bombard them with marketing messages. And Customer Data Cloud has that module as well, right? And there is integration between them to exchange that. So you can see that there's actually overlapping functionality. And then each of these solutions also has a few of their own features, right? So Commerce Cloud CDS, like I said, that's a real-time analytical engine. So what it can do is it can capture the customer behavior when they browse the website. So let's say if they browse a website about toys and they click a lot of Lego, then you can dynamically segment them into that Lego lover category, and you can then dynamically change the appearance of the website. You can give them other banners and other solutions that fit their interests, right? So this is a bit like what you see on Amazon as well. So you can do real-time content personalization, you can personalize the search, you can effectively address that requirement. And basically that is difficult to do with Marketing Cloud, right? Because in Marketing Cloud you would first have to extract that clickstream, you need to segment on it, you need to then analyze it and then push it back into Commerce Cloud. So that real-time segmentation is not that easy with Marketing Cloud. However, what you can do in Marketing Cloud is you can get external data in. Yeah, so with Commerce Cloud CDS, you effectively only see what the customer is doing on the website. But with Marketing Cloud, you can also take external data sources, such as their order history. You can do a recency frequency modulation, monetary value analysis, and you can also look at, let's say, their credit score or other attributes or their location. And then you can use that to do predictive scoring and similar activities, right? So Marketing Cloud adds a few custom features that you don't have in Commerce Cloud. And obviously, Customer Data Cloud adds your identity and access management and also a feature called light registration. So nowadays what happens a lot is that customers actually, when they go to a website, they might not really register straight away and create an account. They might just maybe do like fill in a form, and contact us form. So you only get their email address and not much more. With Customer Data Cloud, you can then capture that already as an identity and then subsequently progressively expand the data that you get. So if they later register, you still have that information, what they did before, right? So they previously had this filled in this form and they have maybe these interests. Okay. So what you can see here is effectively a modular and complementary solution, right? You don't have all the features in all of them. You have some overlaps. And you don't need all of them either. So we have customers that use Commerce Cloud and they use Marketing Cloud, but they don't want to use Customer Data Cloud for their identity and access management. They might use something like Auth0 or a similar solution, right? And that's possible, right? Because I don't need to buy all of C4HANA together. I can actually choose and pick. So SAP probably recognized this at some point in time and changed the way they present the architecture. Rather than having SAP Customer Data Cloud sort of sitting at the bottom, it's now like an equal cloud, right? It just is part of the other clouds and effectively just becomes another thing that you can add to the solution portfolio, but you don't have to, right? You can actually bit by bit expand your portfolio, which is anyways a good strategy if you want to build something in an agile, iterative way rather than doing like a 2 or 3 year big bang rollout of all the clouds at the same time, which in my experience rarely works very well. And in this architecture, you also can see at the bottom right that S4HANA for customer management, which is your CRM inside of S4HANA. So SAP has snuck that in. If you search Google, there are some versions of this diagram where it isn't in. Now they put it in, so just to sort of highlight, yep, you don't need to throw your SAP CRM Interaction Center or your TPM or all these other functionalities in, which you don't currently have in the C4HANA, right? So certain functionalities you need to do in SAP CRM or in S4HANA Customer Management because it is not available in the front office, and it might not make sense to do it in the front office. Now, if I have the choice to choose different clouds and I can combine them as I see fit, what is then the compelling argument? Why should I buy more, or can't I just like take a few? And there are a few arguments, and I think this is sometimes as a consultant you can explain also where it makes sense to add these things. So let's say you have Commerce Cloud and Marketing Cloud, like this customer that I mentioned. If you had Customer Data Cloud as well, what you can do is you can use the Customer Data Cloud user ID as a link between these clouds. And what that means is that effectively your CDC user ID becomes the unique identifier for the customer without having all the data. And the advantage is that then in Marketing Cloud, I don't actually create a new record if, let's say, the email address changes. Right? So in Commerce Cloud, the email address is the main identifier for the customer. And if the customer changes their email address, then I might get into the trouble that with the standard integration, I create a new account in Marketing Cloud. If I have this link in between, I actually maintain the history, I avoid data duplication, and so effectively my CDC in combination with the other clouds helps me to get more functionality, more benefits, and so on. But it's not absolutely required either. Now, SAP is putting one more thing on top now. So in addition to the different clouds, they are also working on something called the Central Customer Master Data Service. And that was announced last year at the TechEd. There's some good YouTube videos on it. And this one actually now provides a little bit of this central customer data repository that maybe in the past people thought CDC would provide. And what this Customer Master Data Service does is it actually provides a service inside of SAP Cloud Platform to centrally access your customer data. It's based on a service that's been around for a while, I think 2 years or something, called Cloud Platform Master Data for Business Partner. So it's literally a business partner solution inside of Cloud Platform. And the vision is that in the future, if I create a customer record in one of the clouds, it will be created in that master data service, and then it automatically becomes available to the other ones as well. In the latest extension package for Commerce, for SAP Commerce and for CDC, there's now integration for this master data service. Right? So TechEd was last year, like October or so, the different TechEds over the year. It was still sort of announced. Now, if you look at the latest release notes, there is actually integration with that service already available. So you can now use sort of an additional master data repository to store your customer data. And the beauty of that solution is that it integrates with your S4HANA and your MDG, so master data governance. And if anyone has ever tried to implement MDG in a very complex landscape, I mean, that's, it has its challenges, especially with like C4C and CRM and other solutions. So if you have this thing in the middle, which is your customer data service, and that integrates with MDG, you're taking a lot of headache out of that integration, because then the clouds at the top don't really need to know about MDG anymore. All they access is a microservice in the cloud platform. Yeah.
The customer data service you said, I'm an MDG that I've worked extensively in the past. The customer data, does that take care of the data conversion as well?
So the question was whether the customer data service takes care of data conversion. Not as far as I know. It can do some filtering and some distribution modeling, but currently the master data is still mastered from MDG itself. So it basically pulls it from there. There is some promise of a golden record creation at some point in time, but currently that's not working. So if you look at the current release notes. Yeah. Cool. So this customer data service actually illustrates a good point, and that is that SAP is actually trying to break up the monolith even further. So if you consider C4HANA a big monolith, actually each of the different clouds themselves are monoliths as well, right? I mean, Commerce, SAP Commerce is a pretty big application, very monolithic application grown over many years. And there are some challenges with it in terms of scalability and building it and really having it on a very large scale. So what SAP is now doing is they're adopting a microservice decoupling approach, and the customer master data service is just one part of it. There are actually more services under development. So there's already a omnichannel pricing service which integrates with custom activity repository. There's an order sourcing service. So traditionally order sourcing would be implemented like directly inside of commerce, or you use some logic in an external OMS. Now SAP is providing a microservice that can do your order sourcing. So if you want to know which plant to deliver an order from, or how much stock is available in a particular plant, traditionally you would call the backend, you would call your ECC system or your S4HANA. But now you can actually replicate stock information into this microservice, and then your clouds can access that service to give you like a cross-cloud comprehensive information about stock availability and which plant to deliver from. Yeah? And if you watch the keynote of the last TechEd and a few of the others, this is across the whole suite, not just C4HANA, also S4HANA and so on. This concept of building application and business services that take functionality out of the big applications, provide them for consumption of different user applications. And conceivably, it doesn't even need to be an SAP application that consumes these services. Right? It could be any type of application that can call a web service ultimately. And so things like pricing and order management will in the future be available outside of the big applications. Yeah, so that's definitely a trend within SAP overall, and particularly within C4HANA as well. And that addresses our reusability requirement, right? So what I was saying before, in a modern enterprise environment, you don't want to have everything bundled inside of an application. Ideally, you would like to have a platform and a bunch of services that you can reuse across your different solution portfolios. So you don't need to reinvent the wheel all the time. Cool. So that's great. So that was on the one data model. Just on the terms of like on the question of extensibility. One thing that SAP has done is it has introduced the SCP extension factory. Who has heard of that before? Yeah, a few. Okay, great. So the SAP extension factory is one of the key strategic technical innovations that SAP is driving at the moment. And effectively, to illustrate a little bit the purpose of it, I'm going to talk a bit about what is actually the problem with the current extension model, right? Why do I need a dedicated technology to extend my applications? So traditionally, you would have done all your extensions inside of your existing solutions, right? So if you wanted to extend SAP Commerce, you would have created an extension there. If you want to extend Cloud for Customer, you would create an extension there using the SDK. And the problem with this is that the product portfolio is actually very heterogeneous, right? So each of these solutions is based on different technologies, right? So C4C is based on NGAP platform and then has its own programming languages and then technologies. SAP Commerce obviously is a beast by itself that needs to be learned. And so you kind of need an expert for each of these solutions, right? If you have a SAP Commerce consultant, you can't put them on a SAP Cloud for Customer extension problem, right? That doesn't work. And the challenge also is that the technologies are quite proprietary and not that well necessarily established in the market. So Cloud for Customer, as an example, like I said, has its own extension technologies. I once ran a training at SAP on technical Cloud for Customer development, and I think I had 2 students in my class. So yeah, there's not that many experts in the market that actually know this stuff, right? So getting someone to build on Cloud for Customer, you probably have to look a bit further and may not be easily available. And the other thing, which is a big problem, and I addressed this already a bit, is the monolithic deployments. So effectively, if you want to make a small change to one of your components and you want to deploy this, you typically have to deploy the entire solution. Right, so you make a change to SAP Commerce in one extension, you change a little bit of functionality. It needs to go through the whole build cycle, it needs to go through the whole continuous integration, continuous deployment cycle, and that deployment can take quite a long time, right? So, and the other problem, of course, is that in large enterprises, you can't just push something into production. You actually need to go through some change approval board, and you need to get like your stuff documented, and typically release cycles are quite long, right? So some customers I work with, we release every 2 weeks, but in some customers it's still like every quarter maybe that they can do one release. And effectively what you want is that if you identify a new business opportunity or you want to make a quick change, you want to be able to deploy that in days or hours, ideally, right? To react to new trends in the market. And the last problem with in-app extensions, of course, is the upgrade problem, right? So if you have made some changes, some custom enhancements in SAP in general, and you want to upgrade, then that's typically requiring a lot of regression testing, a lot of is everything that was working before, is that still working afterwards, right? If SAP releases a service pack or enhancement pack. And that can be quite a nightmarish experience and can be quite cost prohibitive as well, which is also the reason why a lot of customers keep old solutions running around for a long time rather than benefiting from new features that are released in the new versions. So how can SAP Extension Factory help with this, and what's the actual core idea? To illustrate this, I'll talk a bit about a POC that we did in my company around image conversion in Commerce Cloud. So that's not a real website, that's just a stock photo, but illustrates the point. So effectively, when you have a product catalog with images, then typically you need to source those images from somewhere, you put them into a folder, and then you import that into your commerce solution. But typically you want to have a high resolution image for your details page, but then you want to have some lower resolution thumbnail images on your listing page, right? Because you don't want to send like megabytes of images down to view the catalog. And so what typically you do is you have some logic inside of your Commerce Cloud to make some image conversions and effectively create thumbnail versions of those high resolution images. And traditionally, you would have done that inside of Commerce, and that's in fact how we've done it in the past. So you create an extension, you take an SAP Commerce developer that knows Java and Commerce and all the frameworks, and you let them build an extension and you deploy that, and it works, right? Now, if you use the Extension Factory, you don't need to do this inside of Commerce. You can actually do it using any programming language outside of Commerce. So you can use a generic developer, Node.js developer, Java developer, Spring Boot developer, and let them build a microservice that does that particular job, right? Converting a high-resolution image into a low-resolution image. And the way this works in this POC is, as soon as I drop a new product image into my product configuration management, the Commerce Cloud sends an event. And that event goes into the event bus inside the Extension Factory. So there's a tool that captures events, and then it will trigger some business logic, and that business logic will do the conversion. And then that business logic will just use an API inside of Commerce Cloud to send that thumbnail back into Commerce Cloud, right? So if I now have to update this conversion logic, I don't need to touch Commerce anymore. I can just touch that microservice, and Commerce can just keep running by itself. So if I need to make changes to the logic, I can do that very quickly, very dynamically. I mean, that microservice might deploy in seconds, right? My continuous integration pipeline will just chunk it through, and happy days, right? And the cool thing is, of course, if I now decide to use an external service, so I use let's say an external image conversion library, I don't want to program it myself, I can easily do that as well by simply changing the implementation. Yeah. And this is exactly where SAP is going. Rather than reinventing the wheel all the time, they're allowing the SAP Extension Factory via a gateway mechanism to call external services via the standard interface called OSB, Open Service Broker. So if I have, let's say, a service already running in AWS or Azure, it could be a natural language processing service or a pricing service or whatever, I can actually call that directly from the Extension Factory as well, and it takes care of all that authentication and propagation and so on, right? So that makes it very extensible. Yeah? I don't need to do my changes anymore inside of Commerce Cloud. I can actually do these extensions outside, and I can reuse them across the board. Cool. So I'm almost at the end. I'm just going to give you a few more things. We have a session in the afternoon where David is going to talk a bit more about the Extension Factory and how it really works. But just a few things so you have a bit of an idea, for those who haven't looked into it yet. one of the things that SAP is driving across the board, both with SCP and the extension factory, is you can use whatever infrastructure you want. You know that Cloud Foundry can run on different data centers, and similarly my extension factory can actually use different hyperscalers for its operations. At the moment, Azure and Google Cloud are supported. I think AWS might have been released since I created these slides, but either way, you don't actually need to run this anymore inside necessarily an SAP data center, which is cool. Now, the only question is, SAP calls this bring your own license model. And there was a good podcast last year in the Coffee Corner where this caused a lot of confusion, like why do I need to bring my own license? I mean, isn't there SCP? Shouldn't they take care of everything? So why do I need to bring my own hyperscaler and put my extension factory on top? And that's really confusing, but it's kind of ironic, or the core reason for it is actually that the SCP extension factory that you use for C4HANA currently doesn't actually run on SCP. Right? It's called SCP extension factory, but it doesn't run on SCP. And the reason is probably that SAP didn't want to rename it, but in the future it will run on SCP, and SAP will provide a runtime for that. But right now it doesn't. And so you actually need to bring your own Azure, your own Google Cloud, and run it there for the moment being. And that's actually pretty easy, right? I mean, it's really a few clicks in the C4HANA cockpit. So I just say, okay, provide me a new runtime instance for my extension factory. Here are my credentials for my Azure and my Google Cloud, and it just spins up the cluster, the Kima cluster, the Kubernetes cluster, and it's already there. I mean, even like a non-technical person can do that super quickly. You don't need to know about Kubernetes on that level, I mean, from an admin perspective. The confusing thing is, and Phil reported about this when he went to TechEd, at the TechEd there was a talk by Rui Nogueira about the extension factory as well. But that is a different extension factory, because that is the extension factory used for S4HANA Cloud, for other line of business applications like SuccessFactors and Concur. And these two extension factories are not currently running on the same underlying infrastructure, but they will in the future. The SAP will converge this. And I think Rory talked about it a little bit, and I always joke that probably at some point in time, like two teams in SAP were working on extensions, and they met over a beer in a bar, and they said, oh, you're working on extensions? Oh yeah, we're working on extensions too. Oh, fantastic. Let's bring it all together, right? But traditionally it wasn't the case, so you find on the community blogs that are about C4HANA extensions, and it looks technically completely different from what you do in the S4HANA Cloud extensions, where you use like enterprise messaging and Cloud Foundry apps or CAP and programming model, right? And that's really confusing. But in the end, it will actually be all resolved, and all of these things will run on the same underlying central management plane. And the advantage of that will then be that if you want to build extensions for C4HANA, you can then also integrate directly with, let's say, SuccessFactors or S4HANA Cloud, and it will all be quite seamless because SAP will bring it all together on the SAP Cloud Platform. Right. And the last thing there is that in the future, in fact, because SAP is bringing these different approaches together, you will have the runtime of choice. So C4HANA currently uses a runtime called Kima, and I'm not going to go into too much details on this. In fact, I'm not going to go into any detail at all on it, but suffice to say, it basically uses containers and service meshes and Kubernetes and Docker and Istio and a serverless runtime, and so it kind of covers all the buzzwords, and it's therefore really cool. And David's going to talk a little bit more about it in the future. But Kima is the current runtime for C4HANA extensions. If you build extensions for S4HANA Cloud, you do it on Cloud Foundry or on the ABAP RESTful programming model, the REP. And that's currently the separation, as I said. But in the future, it's conceivable that, let's say, you have a lot of ABAP developers in your house and you don't have any subcommerce developers, but you want to build an extension for subcommerce. Then in the future, you can conceivably have your ABAP developers build a CAPM application that extends subcommerce using the events that come from there, right? So it's not anymore necessarily all this separation of different technologies and different programming models. And as a result of this, the different administration UIs that you currently have, so you have the C4HANA cockpit and you have the SAP cockpit, the SAP Cloud Platform cockpit, they will actually just be user interfaces on top of a central management plane. So if you make a change here, you register your S4HANA Cloud, or you make a change there, you register your SAP Commerce, it will immediately show up in the other user interface as well. And Rui actually talked about that in the podcast quite extensively, which is cool. So C4HANA as a suite of solutions is coming much closer to SAP Cloud Platform from an extension perspective. And all of the cool things that you can do in Cloud Platform, you can then also do in C4HANA extensions as well. So in summary, C4HANA is not a monolithic big application, right? It's not meant to replace everything that you're already doing on-premise, right? There's clearly some messaging from SAP that they want to break up the monolith, they want to have different sub services, and they want to make it easily extensible and modular. And that is great. Yeah, so it's modular, complementary, extensible, and reusable, because that way we can create the experiences that our customers actually need, rather than just dumping a big solution in. And yeah, I mean, my son created like some random things there, so with his Tupelo bricks. So, but that's the experience he wanted at that point in time. Thanks. Any questions? Yep.
Suppose we have implemented our solution and we have only CPC and Sales Cloud for now.
Yep.
And we have done some extension on the Sales Cloud. And after some time, like further down the line, if we are implementing Service Cloud on top of that, and our extension is all the overlapping part of between Sales and Service Cloud. So do we have to re-implement or reconfigure our extension, or it will be like intact as we have already implemented in Sales Cloud?
I'll take this. So just for me to understand, you already have done some extensions in Sales Cloud, like in Cloud for Customer? Yeah. Okay. Well, it depends on where the extension is. I mean, Sales Cloud and Service Cloud from Cloud for Customer, they run anyways on the same underlying platform. So you have the same runtime.
So my question is on any cloud. I'm saying that if we have already implemented a cloud and we have done some extension, after that we're implementing another cloud which has some overlapping area on that. So after implementing both the clouds, if our extension was on the overlapping part, so do we have to re-implement or reconfigure our implementation, or the extension, or it will be even intact and we have already implemented on the first?
Okay, I get it. Yeah. So if in this new paradigm you build the extensions on the extension factory, then it will be accessible to all the clouds. Yeah. So from the C4HANA cockpit, you can actually provision your different clouds in the future directly. So rather than going into a separate environment and spinning up a SAP Commerce or asking SAP to provide a C4C tenant, in the future you can go to your C4HANA cockpit, you see all your clouds in there, and you can then also see all the events and all the extensions that are registered, as well as any external services you have. So in a way, that cockpit becomes your central linking element that allows you to see which C4HANA applications you have, which extensions, and you can wire them up. And as long as the other cloud that you're implementing needs that service, it can just call it via an API as well. Yeah, so in Kima, for instance, you can create both event-driven applications as well as microservices. So if, let's say, your Sales Cloud needs a microservice and your Service Cloud, they can both call it from there. Yeah. The problem traditionally that you would have had is if you build the extension directly in one cloud, then it's kind of hidden there, and you need to expose it to the other clouds via dedicated APIs and so on. And you get into this problem of putting different extensions across your landscape rather than in one central place.
One more question. Like, first we implemented one cloud. After that, after some time we have implemented another cloud. We have to do the data integration. But again, we have implemented like say Commerce Cloud on top of that. So do we have to do the integration of the whole cloud altogether again, or we have to just go by the Commerce Cloud and Sales Cloud, Commerce Cloud and Service Cloud?
Yeah, it's a good question. So effectively, at the moment or in the past, you would have built point-to-point integrations between the different clouds depending on your requirements, and you use SAP Cloud Platform integration for that. So there is iFlows to integrate your commerce with your marketing, and your commerce with your CDC, and your commerce with your C4C. And I think that's probably the motivation for SAP to put some central services in the middle, so that you don't have these point-to-point integrations all the time, but you effectively integrate commerce with your master data service, and then you integrate C4C with your master data service. However, there will always be some requirement to have point-to-point integrations via SCPI. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
From an implementation per se, the customer recommendations. Sorry, from an implementation per se, the customer recommendations under the Commerce Cloud.
Yep.
Do we know how are they implemented? Is machine learning at play there, or is it only predictive analytics?
Good question. So CDS is not really my strong suit. My understanding is it does keep a repository of like clickstream as well as the profile underneath. But maybe we can take that. And so yeah, some of the people in my team have experience with CDS, and effectively, yeah, it can do real-time implementation, but I'm not sure if it has any integration with Leonardo AI or so. I don't think so at this stage, but it might be something in the future. Mm-hmm.
I like your caption on the t-shirt about Matthias.
Yeah.
My question is similar to the one folks has asked, that when we are having an extension, can we have it through other world like Azure, AWS, or something that they have built? And do we have connectors which will be going to filter the data? Say, for example, if you want XML format, not an XML format, as a JSON format at the output, will that be going to do by the connectors, or we have to build something new into our C4 Cloud?
Yeah, so the strategy from SAP definitely is to leverage external functionalities such as AWS AWS services, Azure services, and that that strategy actually goes across the entire solution. So SAP has recently discontinued support for things like Redis and PostgreSQL on side of SAP Cloud Platform, and the future idea is you just bring your hyperscaler, you put a managed service on there, like an RDS in AWS, and then you use what's called user-provided services, and you pull those into your extensions on Cloud Platform. So SAP is fully focused on just providing their own value-bringing business services, and everything else should come from external hyperscalers. The integration doesn't really take care of any conversion of formats normally. It's basically just taking care of things like authentication, propagation, secure tunnels, and so on. And typically it's based on JSON. I mean, standard web service calls. So.
How about the pricing? Like Azure have pay-as-you-go pricing, something like that. SAP is coming up with, or we have to pay upfront?
Yeah, that's probably more sub-cloud platform question, but sub-cloud platform currently has two pricing models. Either you have a subscription, where you basically subscribe to a bunch of services with a number of allotments or entitlements, and you pay that effectively based on that volume that you have purchased. And the other model is consumption-based pricing, where depending on how much, like you literally can use unlimited, but the more you use, the more you pay, effectively. That's probably a question for Phil. He might know that much better.
Thanks.
Okay, I think we're out of time, and time for